guys, welcome to Antique Sprinklers. Today we are going to be talking about a variant of a workhorse in agricultural irrigation, and that is the 30LA-TNT sprinkler. And I've got a very old 30 here and a 30LA right next to it. So we're not going to do an in-depth history on the 30 in this video. At some point in the future, we'll do a complete series on all of the rainbird impacts and when they came into production and when they went out of production and that kind of thing. So that's not what this video is. But I think it's worth noting that for the first 2 decades of rainbird's existence, their full circle impact line went with the half-inch 20 and then skipped to the 3/4 inch number 40. And then in the second half of the 1950s, they introduced the 3/4 inch 30, and I think anyone would recognize the transition from that particular version of the 40 to the 30 as something that showed a real leap into the way impact sprinklers even look today. So even at the time of the development of the 30, by then, you know, Rainbird was already well aware that it wasn't always desirable to be sending water up into the air at a trajectory of over 20 degrees. And this was particularly true in situations where you had windy conditions and the wind would just destroy the integrity of that stream of water going up. Secondarily to that, in orchards, they found that it was better to be spraying water under the canopy of the trees rather than up into the tree canopy. Although in a lot of those cases, a truly flat sprinkler is what's desirable. And so they'd come up with some low-angle versions of the sprinklers they had up to that point, and they were aware that they needed to do that if they were going to have broad success with the 30. So to achieve a low-angle version of their sprinkler in a cost-effective manner, they took a twofold approach. The first was they altered the bore of the drive nozzle, which is also the range nozzle on the 30, to a lower trajectory. And now that trajectory is somewhat dependent on how far you screw that nozzle back into the sprinkler body. And so to ensure proper alignment, Rainbird actually stamped the word top on the nozzle to show where you should be having that, you know, perpendicular to the body and also parallel to the ground. So that made sure that you had water leaving the sprinkler at the trajectory that you intended anyway. The second way they accomplished building their low-angle sprinkler, they needed a way to make sure the thing they still drove it efficiently. And so in an impact sprinkler, where the water interacts with the spoon on the lever really makes a big difference. So they had to cast a very specific low-angle lever, and that's why it says 30LA on this lever, so they knew that that was the one. And so just through those two changes, everything else is the same. These have different bearings for a different reason. Rainbird had a heavy wear bearing. It was their RZ bearing. That has nothing to do with the angle of the sprinkler. They're both TNTs, by the way. That's the bearing on them. And that's all you could get the 30LA in during its life. But anyhow, just through changing the lever and the nozzle, you went from having a standard 30 that was going to have, I think at the height of the arc, it was something like 9 feet over the top of the nozzle, to the original 30LA. The height of the arc was only about 3 feet over the top of the nozzle. And I'm going to show these two guys running back to back so you can see sort of the difference in that. And so in a very cost-effective way, and in a way that you could actually alter in the field if you had the right tools, you could turn your standard Rainbird 30 into a Rainbird 30LA. So this Rainbird 30LA was introduced by the early 1960s, and by the late 1970s, it had been replaced by the 30CP. And the 30CP had a body on it that was derivative of the 30H, which had been introduced in 1974. And instead of sort of a flat bottom of the sprinkler body, it has more of a bell shape there. And then the 30CP also had sort of a rubber gasket that protected that bearing from sand and stuff like that. And that was the low-angle variant. So the 30LA is a relatively short-lived sprinkler. It might be why you don't see a ton of them out there today. I'm going to say that it was somewhere between, 15 to 17 years in production, probably, maybe a couple of years longer than that, but that would be about it. So this very specific Rainbird 30LA comes to me from my good friend Brad out in California. It's got the copper spring. I think, in my mind, that and given its overall lifespan, that places it probably being produced somewhere in the 1960s. At some point, somebody put some grease or something on the bearing, which I had to deal with and clean out before it would actually spin freely.
Don't do
But
that.
now it works pretty good, and and it's a cool sprinkler to have. So we're going to show both of these guys, as I mentioned, running. They're both pretty darn old sprinklers. They're probably both 60 years old, maybe more, and probably more actually. But they both run real nice, which is one of the nice things about the 30s. They were incredibly durable and fairly easily repaired. So you're going to see both these guys in operation, and you can see especially when the spray is going past my fence and into the adjacent neighbor's yard. You'll be able to tell just by how much it's clearing the fence there, kind of what the low angle one is and the standard one is. So the other thing I'd say is if you like this kind of content, please go ahead and hit subscribe. We put out videos on the history of the irrigation industry on a very regular basis, and we have told a ton of that history in a series of hundreds of videos, and have hundreds more lined up because there's a lot more of the story yet to tell. And if you subscribe, you will be aware when those are available. And the other thing, of course, as always, I genuinely appreciate that folks watch and comment and like these videos. So please continue to do so. And thank you very, very much.